The early reports, everybody who was around there mentioned the massive explosion and the mushroom cloud.
See this thing come across the front of the truck, and it was like a flame on the bottom, eh?
Two truckers on the highway were almost under the flight path when the aircraft passed over, and they both said they saw fire on the right-hand side.
U.S. Army officials deny there was any unreported or classified cargo on board Aero Air 1285. But Philotas has reason to doubt that claim.
When the troops' equipment was loaded on board, there were some of these big boxes. What could have been on there, and we couldn't get any answer. There was no cargo manifest, and it was another contentious question that was never settled.
Not much attention clearly was paid to security procedures, and you know, this was a different time, admittedly, but still I think the lack of security at Cairo at the airport as the soldiers came on board the Aero Air flight for the return journey, I think anybody would have to regard it as shocking, even for their time, and it's the kind of thing that would never be allowed to happen today.
Philotas joins those speculating that Aero Air Flight 1285 was the victim of a terrorist plot.
Was it Hezbollah? Did it have any kind of European connections? And the big question that always in the back of American governmental and security authorities' minds is there a Cold War dimension to this? Are the Soviets involved?
The testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, I do. Please be seated.
Some now wonder if Aero Air 1285 was at the center of the biggest global scandal of the time. The U.S. plot to illicitly provide Iran with arms in exchange for American hostages.
Aero Air was indeed one of the airlines that assisted a covert operation that was being mounted at the time out of the Reagan White House by a famous individual by the name of Colonel Ollie North. And the Iran-Contra business was very tangled in a very peculiar covert operation.
It was not a thin, tiny layer of ice on the wings.
Philotas points to photographic evidence to prove his case.
My colleague made a trip out to Gander and went to the RCMP photo lab there, where they had literally thousands that they took on the crash site. Many photos that seemed to indicate that there was some kind of an explosion on board. That's just like if you took a piece of aluminum foil and poked your finger in it. It would curl out from the inside to the outside, and it would be obvious from which side you put your finger through.
Philotas becomes even more suspicious when he learns that an independent investigator hired by Aero Air had explored the possibility of an onboard explosion.
He carefully looked at everything and found that on the number 3 engine, that's the inboard engine on the right-hand side, some of the inlet guide vanes, 3 of them consecutive ones, had sort of a dent in the leading edge, and one of them had some red paint on it.
That investigator concluded that there could have been a mid-air explosion, and that the damage and the paint markings inside the engine could have been caused by debris exploding outward from the main fuselage. Another key piece of information for Philotas comes from the post-mortem examination of some of the 256 victims. Autopsies indicate that there were extremely high levels of carbon monoxide in their blood.
So if they have combustion products in their lungs, natural inference is that they must have breathed in some combustion products before the crash.
From all this evidence, Philotas and his colleagues paint their own picture of the crash.
Hell was that? Smoke! Smoke in the cockpit! Smoke!
But the lead investigators, McNair and Bogue, maintain that the sabotage theories are nothing more than a sensationalist distraction.
We had no indication that terrorism was a player, but we did have a lot of indication that there was an aircraft performance problem and there were icing problems.
McNair and Bogue decide the only way to end all the speculation is to scientifically prove their theory that ice combined with extra weight is what brought down Flight 1285.
Okay, you want to give her the once-over?
Before the mid-1980s, little was known about the aerodynamic impact of very thin ice accumulation. The flight engineer who inspected the aircraft was likely only looking for large buildups of ice that would make the plane significantly heavier, not thin coatings on top of the wings.
As part of the investigation, we did a lot of research on the effects of ice on aircraft.
Aerodynamic tests carried out in a wind tunnel reveal that even a small amount of ice contamination can significantly reduce wing lift.
Just a small amount, say the size of some sandpaper, if that's the type of surface you have, it can seriously degrade a large aircraft. That was a surprise to me.
The team carries out further tests in a flight simulator.
We basically had to reprogram the simulator to degrade the performance to simulate ice.
V1, rotate.
Every attempt to fly the simulator with the exact same parameters as Flight 1285 ends the same way, with a stall and a crash.
Okay, let's run it again with 10,000 less pounds.
From the simulator trials, we realized with icing on board, what degraded the lift characteristics of the aircraft, it was difficult to fly a normal profile, and you could easily lose control of the aircraft.
Just flying like a pig. Positive rate? Negative? Full power.
The pilots would have been able to see that their plane wasn't climbing fast enough.
What's your altitude? Pull up. Come on, airspeed. Airspeed. Watch the trees.
First Officer Connolly pulled the nose back, trying to get the plane in the air. What he didn't realize is that he was sealing their fate. The DC-8 was already on the verge of a stall. Pulling the nose up only made things worse. The aircraft's weight had been underestimated, its lift compromised by ice on the wings. A fatal combination.
If you take one of the factors out, if you take the ice out and have the same weight, maybe you won't have the accident. If you take out the heavy weight and still have the icing, maybe you won't have the accident. But if you have them combined together, you have the accident.
As for the suspicious paint markings found inside the engine, McNair determines they came from a front-end loader used to clear debris at the crash site. As well, the extreme intensity of the fire could have caused the abnormally high level of carbon monoxide in the victim's blood. Even the trucker's accounts of pre-impact flames can be explained.
If you have an airplane flying at high angle of attack, where it's in a stalled regime, typically or often you will have flame coming from the engine because of compressor stall.
As for the terrorists' capability to pull off such a complex, brazen attack, there is significant doubt.
Could they have done it? In terms of intent, yes. In terms of actually pulling that operation off, in the circumstances, you know, that seems to me low probability, but just at the edges of the margins of the possible.
There was a lot of controversy, which we just basically had to deal with in terms of keeping on with our job, because the investigation is not an emotional issue, it's a scientific issue. So we basically had to stick with science. We didn't see any evidence of any other kind of explosion. We only saw the evidence of an explosion caused by impact and the aircraft breaking up.
McNair believes his conclusion carries an urgent warning for the entire airline industry.
A lot of people have a hard time believing that a little tiny bit of ice on a large wing will have a big effect, but it does.
After nearly 3 years of painstaking research and investigation, the Canadian Aviation Safety Board is ready to release its report. But what is supposed to provide answers and prevent similar accidents, instead ignites a storm of controversy.
The ice theory is flat out wrong.
CASB investigators believe they have a convincing report that explains the complex cause of the crash of Flight 1285.
I was hoping that, as all investigators do, when the final report came out, that in fact the safety message would be out there and would be accepted.
But 4 of the 9 members of the board disagree with the report's conclusion.
This investigation appears to involve a cover-up.
It's impossible that ice would have been a factor.
The dissenters take the unprecedented step of releasing their own minority report, citing an onboard explosion as the cause.
We had an extremely difficult time in putting out our dissenting report. We were given a very restricted time, and then there was an attempt to suppress it.
It was quite unusual to have a dissenting report written with photographs. I don't see merit in it. I totally don't understand why it was issued in the first place. Why would you come up with this? What's the scientific basis for it? There is no science.
Hey, look. Paint transfer means nothing. The crew blood samples means nothing. The peddling is meaningless. Therefore, you have no evidence of terrorism. This proves nothing.
In this particular case, of course, what we had was an extraordinary outcome, where you have a majority and a minority report which are deeply divergent and which raise very different kinds of pictures about what the outcome of this crash would be.
I think it's very tough for families and friends not to have final closure on something. There was really no definitive answer to what caused that crash. If I was a family member, I'd have questions too.
But on March 10th, 1989, while the controversy continues to swirl, there's tragic evidence that McNairn-Bogue's message has not been heard. In Dryden, Ontario, in wintry conditions, the crew of a Fokker F-28 elects not to de-ice. Just seconds after takeoff, the plane cannot achieve sufficient lift to get airborne. The accident was almost identical to Aero Air 1285.
The airplane hit the tree canopy intact. After that, it exploded because, in fact, it hit the ground with a lot of fuel on board.
The crash kills 24 of 69 people on board.
It was pretty clear from Dryden that icing or snow may have been a factor in this as well.
If only the investigators' warning had been heard, the tragedy in Dryden may never have happened.
The fact that there was a lot of controversy around this investigation was very unfortunate because basically it took away from the safety message. Aircraft, like the DC-8, are very vulnerable to icing contamination. That message was lost because of the controversy in the bomb theory.
But those who held firm to the bomb theory stand by their actions.
It does not advance safety to get the wrong cause of an accident. The real safety message is that you have to get at the truth, and the truth and the facts of this accident were never finally established.
The controversy over this investigation spelled the end of the Canadian Aviation Safety Board. It was scrapped and later replaced with a new, better regulated agency.
We learned a lesson that cost a lot of people their lives, and that lesson didn't get passed on to other people, and other people lost their lives. That's the sad part for me.
I know in my own case, if I really didn't know all the answers and I had lost someone in that terrible crash, I wouldn't be satisfied. It's tough when you don't know and you've lost someone that's near and dear to you. I think we all want to know.